Let's go. It's time!
Get up, let me begin. This is TWSN. You ain't heard about us yet, well you better know now, because it's the place that it all goes down on.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Strikes and Submissions. Back again with my guy, Mike Daly. How you doing today?
Dorian, I'm fantastic. You know what they say, another week, another W. So let's get right to it.
I don't know who says that, but I'm rolling with it. First and foremost, guys, make sure you download the TWSN mobile app. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, as well as subscribe to us on YouTube. Drop a like on the video. It helps us do well. Shouts out Dash. Hashtag no decisions. He knows what it is. And we got a big week of fight news, Mike. Got a whole bunch of fight announcements. We have some stuff to recap. So want to dive straight into it. One of the first fights that were announced, we have Cody No Love Garbrandt making his flyweight debut, going up against Kara-France from City Kickboxing at 125. I mean, this is going to be a banger. Pretty sure it's a main event, December 11th. It's looking like. So, I mean, what are your initial thoughts of that? Obviously, I don't know if you have who's going to win yet or what, but how you see that fight playing out?
I don't have any official prediction yet. One, because it's so far away. And two, I'm not a big fan of Cody Garbrandt going down to 125 after a loss. And I understand the play. I understand the move. There's not a whole lot for him to do in the bantamweight division right now. And he had already planned to go down to 125. But as a fan of Cody Garbrandt and someone who has paid attention to things he said, I only would have wanted him to drop down to flyweight for a title. That's the only time. Now you're fighting Kara-France, who is a solid flyweight, but is 1-1 in his last two fights, and he lost to Brandon Royval in September, bounced back in March. I think if you're Cody Garbrandt, if you're looking to stay in the flyweight division long term, this is a good fight. But if you're not looking to be there very long, I don't know if it makes a whole lot of sense, Dorian.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, he did want to drop down to fight Figueiredo for the flyweight strap, but hey, at the end of the day, it's the fight game. You know, you lose a fight to Rob Font, and now you're kind of back at the bottom of the barrel in bantamweight. You know, he's been a champion and he's had plenty of shots at the belt, so it's going to be harder for him to make his way back to a title shot, I think, at 35. 25, I kind of like the move for Cody. You know, move down, fight some smaller guys. He still has knockout power in his hands. I think that he may have gotten a little too comfortable standing and just trading, because that's how he made his name. You know, that's how he got his notoriety and his fame in MMA. But now he's banging with flyweights. You know, he's going to have to be a little more quick, a little more technical. And Kara-France is a dog. And I know you said he's 1-1 in his last two, but that Brandon Royval fight, I was actually rewatching it literally, I think last night or 2 nights ago. If you saw my Instagram story, I was doing some film study on Royval, and that was a great fight. So I think nonetheless, we're in for a banger. Hopefully it is a main event so we can see them go 25 minutes. Give a guy like Kara-France the rub he deserves, you know, with a huge name like Cody Garbrandt. And honestly, if he gets a win there, he's right in the title picture at 25, because it's not clear who's the number one contender. You know, I feel like if he gets a win there, he can put his name in for, hey, I'm next in line. And he might not be right, but just off the name value and recognition alone, he can get the shot. So that's going to be interesting, to say the least. But another great fight we have announced, and me and you have been clamoring for it. The entire MMA community has been clamoring for it, probably since Michael Chandler came over to the UFC. We thought this should have been arguably his first fight, maybe. You know, we have finally at UFC 268 in November, Justin Gaethje against Iron Mike Chandler. How do you see that one going?
I don't even know if that fight's going to happen based on all of the speculation. But if it does happen, I think the former interim champion, Justin Gaethje, he's in a position to win. The reason why I think he has a pretty good shot to win is because going into it, he knows that Michael Chandler is going to try to grapple him. And look, Justin Gaethje, although he lost, although he was submitted by Khabib, he put up a pretty decent performance for as long as he survived in that fight. I think this one, even with some time off, at that point, it'll probably be over a year between his last fight. I think he will have more than enough time to work out all the problems he had with his ground game. And right now, look, I'm not saying I favor Justin Gaethje, but I think losing the way Michael Chandler did was so debilitating. And then now you have to fight someone who's a savage in Justin Gaethje. That's not an easy thing to get up for. And also, too, with all the outside stuff regarding where the fight could take place, I don't know if that necessarily helps Michael Chandler. It's a lot of issues that I think the UFC has to cross. And it's just an example of the UFC now is going to start running into problems that other professional sports leagues have run into when you start moving to different states. Because, look, the UFC is trying to move out of the 4 states they have been in, Florida, Texas, Arizona, Nevada. They're trying to move to other states. So I think that could be a problem. But as long as the fight happens, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, and I mean, whether it's in MSG or in, Vegas, I could care less personally. Now, for the fight, you brought up an interesting point. Gaethje it's going to be a year off because he fought Khabib in October of last year, and the fight's booked for November. So over a year off, he didn't take much damage in the fight. He got, triangle choke and he got put to sleep. But he even said in his post-fight interview, he was like, hey, man, the good thing about getting put to sleep is there's no real damage. So I'm ready to get back in there. And it was kind of weird that the UFC was holding him out for as long as they did without, any reason why. He was saying he wanted to fight, and Chandler's been calling him out 100 times. He said, I called him out 4 or 5 times and he declined the fight and he did this. Gaethje was like, bro, I'm on vacation. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
And as soon as Gaethje got off vacation, boom, now we have the news. So we know Gaethje wasn't ducking. And I'm jumping out the window early, and I know when the MMA community hypes up fights like this, it never turns out as big as it's supposed to be. But this has fight of the year written all over it. It's going to be one of the last pay-per-views, either 1 or 2 more pay-per-views left in the year. If they go out with a bang, and on top of that, you got, title fights after that. So it's not going to be a main event. It's only going to be 3 rounds more than likely. I don't think they're going to do 5 rounds for this. I don't know if they're going to get the Diaz co-main treatment.
They shouldn't.
I don't really like the 5-round co-main thing, but with these two, this is going to be the most intense 15 minutes you'll ever see. If if you're new to MMA and you want a fight to look for, this is the fight to look forward to. So that's that on that.
And what helps Dorian is that it's not the main event, so there's less pressure. Clearly, there's always going to be pressure, especially if you're fighting at Madison Square Garden or the T-Mobile Arena, but they're not headlining. So I think that will help. And maybe if you are someone like yourself who thinks this will be a fight of the year, the fact that it's a co-main and not a main event might help it.
Oh, yeah. Because let's be honest, these guys aren't making it to the bell anyway. This isn't going to decision. These two don't fight for decisions. These two fight for finishes. You see Chandler's last fight. He had Oliveira hurt, and he came out and got cracked. No decision. Gaethje, even in the Ferguson fight, he was lighting him up. He wasn't trying to get a decision. He's trying to take his head off. And Khabib's Khabib. I'm done, giving fighters hell for, their grappling's bad. Khabib took him down and choked. Khabib does that to everybody. So I don't think Gaethje's worried about his grappling, especially with Michael Chandler. I think this is going to be a stand and bang type of fight. 2 guys who've been wanting to get at each other for a while, and finally they're here, and not for nothing, their backstories are kind of interesting. 2 of the best fighters outside of the UFC come to the UFC, and, a couple years later, now they're getting to meet. So interesting. Another interesting fight that we were also kind of anticipating, kind of not, Islam Makhachev, Rafael Dos Anjos, aka RDA. They're booked for October 30th, UFC 267. Now, that's going to be a great fight. Real quick, I'm just saying, RDA, you are one of my favorite fighters, not because of what you do in the ring. Granted, you're great, all time, going to make the Hall of Fame. But it's the guy, look at RDA's resume. He's fought anybody worth fighting in his division, in the division above. He'll go up. He'll fight at 170. He'll fight Usman. He'll fight Leon Edwards. He'll fight Colby Covington, for an interim belt. And then at 55, he fights killers too. He doesn't get an easy fight. And Islam Makhachev, I know you're huge on the Islam train. I'm slowly but surely getting on the Islam train, but it's going to be a hell of a fight, man.
Come aboard. And the thing about this fight, that as someone who, I just want to see these two fight. They were supposed to fight November 14th of last year. Now, pretty much a year to the day, minus about 2 weeks or so, it's going to happen. And I think this will be the ultimate litmus test for both of these guys. If Islam Makhachev is able to win, then I think you will start having serious conversations about him being a title contender. If Dos Anjos is able to win, he's still in the title picture. Some people think he's past his prime. I am one of those, but if he beats someone like Islam, you have to give him serious nods for him to fight for a title. So this is going to be a very important fight. And that card too, that October 30th card is stacked.
Absolutely. And not for nothing, RDA must have some love-hate relationship. Oh my gosh, Nate. Roo. I think RDA has some love-hate relationship with wrestlers. He just wants to keep fighting wrestlers and they keep taking him down. I don't get it. But I mean, it's going to be a great fight nonetheless. I think RDA has something to prove. And not for nothing, a little more backstory on this fight. Obviously, Khabib and RDA have had their fair share of talk over the years, and Islam is like, all right, let me help you out there. Let me beat you and let you know you'll never be on Khabib's level. And RDA was saying, hey, if I beat him, Khabib, come get this smoke. So obviously, I don't think Khabib will, but not for nothing, you have a reason to look forward to this fight. And last but certainly not least, I'm happy Paulo Costa's returning against Marvin Vettori. They have it scheduled as of now for October 23rd. It's going to be a fight night. Hopefully they main event. Costa signed his contract agreement with some liquor next to him. I don't know if you saw the picture of him. So I love a guy who can make a joke about himself. But yeah, Costa Vettori, man, both guys just lost to Izzy. They're coming back. How do you see that one going?
I think, and I actually disagree with Nader's latest comment, I don't think Paulo Costa is going to win. I think Marvin Vettori is going to find a way to grapple with him, although Paulo Costa is very solid on the ground. I think that's overlooked just because of his ability to put strikes on people and make it hard to survive the storm. But I think Marvin Vettori, I don't see Paulo Costa being able to stop him. I think if Costa's going to win, I think it's going to be by a clear decision. Could this be a 2.0 version of Paulo Costa, Yoel Romero? Perhaps. But I right now favor Marvin Vettori. And one more thing, Dorian. This is a fight that it's featuring two middleweights who a lot of people don't like. Let's just be honest. A lot of people are not big fans of two of these guys because they love Israel Adesanya so much. And you can make the case Costa is enemy number one, and then enemy number two is Vettori. They're going to fight. So I think the build-up to that fight is going to be terrific.
Absolutely. And I saw someone on Twitter label this the Battle of the Middleweight Brutes. So I thought that was pretty funny, Battle of the Brutes. But yeah, man, you don't think Costa, man. I mean, Vittori's hard, but I think Costa is going to come back in spectacular fashion. And no disrespect to Vettori. Mm-hmm. I don't see him taking Costa down. Costa's a huge guy. I see this going similar to the Romero fight, in all honesty. Shouts out Marissa. She knows what it is. Costa all the way. I think that but if it stays on the feet, Costa has the clear advantage. I think we can agree with that. But if Vettori gets it to the ground, like you said, it's going to be interesting to see Costa's ground game. So, and again, we haven't seen him in a while since, he last lost to Izzy, and he's coming back. Honestly, is this a number one contenders fight? Because I don't see anybody else at middleweight who's on a streak. These guys are both coming off of losses to the champ. It's hard to say it'll be a number one contender fight, but middleweight's looking a little and, if Vettori wins, you can't, have the Izzy trilogy right away if he beats Whitaker, obviously. But moving on from these fight announcements, man, we have some actual fights that happened. Uriah Hall and Sean Strickland happened, and I'm not going to toot my own horn. I don't do the humble thing here. I know. I called it. Sean Strickland was going to walk him down, beat him up. Shouts out Uriah for taking the beating for all 5 rounds. I even had my grandma call me. She was like, hey, who's this guy on TV? Like, why is he not fighting back? I was like, oh, grandma, it's just Uriah Hall. He's just getting beat up. No big deal. If you listen to the pod, you would have known this was going to happen. But nah, for real though, Sean Strickland, Uriah Hall, what were your takeaways from that?
It was an entertaining fight. I think people were disappointed in Uriah Hall's inability to land the strikes that would have gotten Sean Strickland's attention. In the past, I feel like Uriah Hall has had output issues. I don't think that was the problem in this case because I feel like he tried, but Sean Strickland, the problem with anyone who's fighting Sean Strickland, the guy doesn't go away. You cannot get him away. The only person I've really seen be able to just quell Sean Strickland is Kamaru Usman, and that was over 4 years ago at welterweight. Yes, that was a long time ago, and since Sean Strickland, he's been on a tear, and it doesn't matter. Sean Strickland, even though he has his hands down and he's talking to you, he keeps going. The guy is a wild man, and look, Sean Strickland, at this point in time, came into the fight as the number 11th ranked middleweight. There are talks of him potentially fighting Luke Rockhold. I don't know who he will fight, but I think
that's signed.
Okay.
I think it's signed and booked, actually.
So if it is signed and booked, I think that's a solid fight. And if he wins that, Sean Strickland, I think, might have a chance at fighting someone in the top 7 in the middleweights, like someone like a Jack Hermanson or whoever's available in that top 7 or even in the top 10. I think Sean Strickland, if he's able to beat Luke Rockhold, will have one more fight, and then we could be talking about him possibly fighting Israel Adesanya or whoever else may be the champion at that point because, like you said, Dorian, the middleweight division, although there are a lot of talented fighters, it's a little thin. There's not a whole lot going on, and I think if Sean Strickland is able to keep it up, he's going to have himself a home atop. And then on the other end, if I'm looking at Uriah Hall, I don't know where he goes from here. I think he's going to find himself on pay-per-views, but maybe at the very start of a pay-per-view like he was against Chris Weidman, or he'll be on the prelims, headlining a prelim, or he'll just be on fight night cards. I don't see him main eventing a card in the near future, if not again, because he's 37 years old. He's old, and he needed this win, and he didn't get it.
Yeah, I agree with your point on that. Like he's on a nice little 4-fight win streak, and it was kind of like his last it was like his last hoorah to get a title shot because he's never gotten one. But unfortunately, to be the man, you gotta beat somebody. And granted, he beat Chris Weidman, check broken ankle, beat Anderson Silva, obviously way past his prime, but still, Anderson Silva's a name you can put on your resume. Mm-hmm. But for being honest, Sean Strickland is undefeated at middleweight. I'm going to say it again. He's undefeated at middleweight. He's won his last 5 fights, and every single fight has been the exact same. He walks through you like a rock'em sock'em. I'm dead. Shouts out Aljo, too. He going to get it back in blood against Peter Yan. But anywho, he just walks through you. He walks through punches. He walks through, clinch exchanges. He's everything you don't want if you're a counter striker like Uriah Hall. You want a guy who's going to stand there and pick shots so you can counter those shots. If he's just walking towards you and constantly pressuring you, you're going to have a hard night, which is why, for me, I thought it was one of the easier locks of the night as far as the card. And I do think, like you said, Sean Strickland gets a win over Luke Rockhold, which I expect him to do, given the layoff Luke's been on and him coming back after getting chinned by Jan. I thought he was going to retire, I'm not going to lie. But I think Luke Rockhold, even though he isn't ranked, obviously, he's a big enough name to where if Sean impresses Izzy might be like, okay, I'll take that guy next. Because, like I said, no one else in the middleweight division is really on a streak. You got Costa, who just lost to him. Vettori just lost to him. Whitaker is on a streak, and he's about to fight him for the second time. Gastelum, he's lost a couple. So you got a lot of guys in the top who aren't on streaks except Derek Brunson. Now, that's a rematch I think is coming down the line. If he gets a win over Darren Till and, Strickland gets a win over Rockhold, maybe they can have a number one contenders fight. Something like that, maybe. I don't know. I'm not the matchmaker, but leave it up to Sean Shelby for that. But what I will say, as far as the fight, I was extremely impressed by Strickland's just composure. Even though, like you said, he does talk to you, he does, have his antics, he stayed composed. The main event didn't look like it was too big for him. We know Uriah's main evented before. He's been on pay-per-views before in big spots. So for him, we didn't expect it to be a big deal. But for Strickland, it was his first one. And I think he handled it extremely well. Obviously got the win unanimously. I don't think anyone on the planet thinks Uriah won that fight. So, hey, give him the next in line. He's ready and he's rolling.
His ability to go for a takedown, too, was something that surprised me. Although I knew that was in his arsenal, I thought the fight against Uriah Hall was going to be primarily a stand and bang, which it was for most. I'm not saying it wasn't. But Sean Strickland, the fact that he was able to kind of pull out another tool out of his tool bag, if you will, and get the job done and secure the victory, that's what he did. I don't necessarily know if Sean Strickland will have as easy of a time once you start getting to the upper tier of the middleweights. And you can say, oh, well, Michael, Uriah Hall was the 8th ranked middleweight coming into that fight. And you'd be right. But I think Uriah Hall, I don't necessarily know if he was deserving of that ranking. I'm going to be honest, because he's a bit older. He beat Anderson Silva. The fight against Chris Weidman, although a win's a win, it was a little, it was freakish. Let's be honest. It was a freakish win. So when we're looking at 8th ranked middleweights or 8th ranked anyone in any division, I don't necessarily know if it was a heavier division, if Uriah Hall would be there, because I just think the middleweight division, it's kind of thin, and that's why Uriah Hall is there. Uriah Hall should be ranked, but 8th, I don't know. So that's why I think as Sean Strickland fights higher ranked opponents, he'll have a bit of a tougher time.
I mean, I see what you're saying, but I don't think that's fair to Uriah, because at the end of the day, you can only fight who's in front of you. So if he checks a kick against Weidman and Weidman breaks his foot, it is a freak injury, but he intended to do that. So it's a knockout for him. You can, maybe a lot of people wouldn't, but me personally, I feel comfortable saying, Uriah Hall knocked Chris Weidman out more so than I would feel comfortable saying like Dustin Poirier knocked Conor out in the 3rd fight, if you know what I mean. Because it was like a check, immediate snap, as opposed to like check and then 3 minutes later steps back on it and it breaks, so no one kind of really knows. So it was freakish, but it was defended well. That was, and he said it in interviews after. He was like, "Yeah, I broke a teammate's leg checking a kick. This is what happens if you kick hard and I check. That's what's going to happen. This was supposed to happen at least." But I see what you mean as far as the upper echelon of middleweights. Uriah isn't there.
No, he's not.
He's not. He's a great striker, but I think that's about it. And I think he's been resting on his laurels, if you'd say, in the UFC with just the striking. Hasn't really improved. Like you said, he's had output issues. They were talking about it the entire commentary, really the whole night. They're like, oh, which Uriah is going to show up? You know, we really didn't know. So I don't know. I hope that he does get a chance to compete again. I hope this isn't like the end of the road for him. Yeah. I do want to see him again. You know, he is an exciting fighter. But like you said, you got to see which one of the Uriah shows up that night to really get a real grasp on how the fight's going to go, I guess, if that makes sense.
Dorian, to that point, and the reason why I guess I'm discrediting Uriah Hall, even though I don't intend to, is because if you're the 8th ranked middleweight in the world, you shouldn't be gun shy. Let's be honest. You shouldn't be. Even Kelvin Gastelum, who's the 9th ranked, I don't think I would say he's gun shy. He has his own issues in the octagon, but being gun shy is not one of them. In the Anderson Silva fight, that was a fight that although he won, I think he should have won more handily. And you could say I'm nitpicking, that's fine. But if you are the 8th ranked guy in a division, I'm sorry, you have to come with more than being a little tentative. So that's why I'm just saying for Sean Strickland moving forward, I think he's going to hit a few more roadblocks than he did against someone like Uriah Hall. And even if he fights someone else that slides into that 8th ranked spot, I think it'll be a tougher challenge. That's all I'm saying.
I see what you're saying, and you're absolutely nitpicking a guy who finished Anderson Silva saying he should have did it better. But
Dana White said the same thing, though. And a lot of people have said it about Uriah Hall, too. I think that's part of the reason why Uriah Hall doesn't get the credit he deserves, at least to some people, because he kind of does it to himself.
Yeah, and I think it's a gift and a curse when you're that type of talented and you're on the Ultimate Fighter. You have a wheel kick knockout, and everybody's like, oh, my God, you're so talented. You can be the next insert great here. And he's just looking at it like, okay. And you can tell he may not really have believed in himself like everyone else believed in him. So I think everyone kind of placed those expectations on him. And that's why we're getting, okay, you're gun shy as opposed to you're a counter striker. You know, like the narrative changes when different people are in the room. So I see what you mean. And Dana criticizes fighters all the time. Dana criticized Tyron Woodley after fighting Damian Maia. And then everybody else who fought Damian Maia after that fought him the exact same way. Because it works. You don't want to get choked out by him. But moving on to a fight that shouldn't be criticized, because we called it. Let's keep it funky. We called it. We can toot our own horns. AJ McKee versus Pitbull. We had Bellator 263 for the featherweight Grand Prix, the $1 million check, and the belt. And my boy AJ got it done. Ain't nothing more to be said. Like, how'd you like that fight, man? I enjoyed it.
I was in dismay. AJ McKee, yes, he has fought every single professional fight in Bellator. I knew the moment wouldn't be big for him. He would find a way to be even-keeled. But to finish Patricio Pitbull Freire, who is arguably the greatest Bellator fighter in history, in the very first round, it's outstanding. I don't think anyone saw that coming. I didn't. You said it. We both thought he was going to win, but I thought it was going to be a close fight. I thought it was going to go the distance, and AJ McKee would just outpoint him, because AJ McKee can do that. But he came out, landed the head kick, dropped Pitbull, threw flurries. I let out an audible yell when AJ McKee threw his arms up in the air. I was like, what are you doing? No, you got to keep going. Luckily, though, Pitbull, although he was able to stand up because of that, and that actually, in a way, it kind of helped Pitbull, because Pitbull had allowed him 2 or 3 seconds to get up, kind of get his bearings straight. But the problem, he led with his neck once he stood up, had it vulnerable, and then AJ just locked on with the standing guillotine, and that was all she wrote. Mike Beltran, a terrific stoppage. Some people were saying that Pitbull wasn't out or he should have let it go a little bit longer. Look, AJ McKee, see what he did to Darian Caldwell, and then you'll understand why Mike Beltran stepped in there and stopped the bout.
Yeah, and the point that you made, I love that you said that. After the head kick, he got up. He got a couple seconds because, AJ celebrating, thought he had a walk-off. I just won $1 million off a head kick, right? That'd be great. He stands up. He gives his neck. Now, to people who may not have ever trained MMA, to think, is it easier to choke a guy later in the fight, earlier in the fight? Any submission early in the fight, you don't want to be in it. Both guys are dry. The sweat hasn't broken out yet. Literally, what was it? 2 minutes in? Not even, like a minute and a half in. And you get a standing guillotine locked up against the fence. That's the worst place possible for Pitbull to be. And as you said, great stoppage. I think he was going to get dropped. It would have looked exactly like John Jones, Lyoto Machida, if Beltran didn't stop it when he said stop. Because you saw he caught him afterwards. Mm-hmm. How can you say it's a bad stoppage if he had to catch the fighter? But we're not going to address them. All I'm going to say is, shouts out AJ McKee. I called it. I called the knockout. I thought it would be similar to the Aldo McGregor type of thing where, the trash talk just gets into his head. You've been at the top of the heap for so long and you're the best and everyone's telling you you're the best fighter in this promotion's history. And then all of a sudden you got this kid talking about, I'm going to knock you out. Like, wait, what? No, you're not. Like, no, yeah, I'm going to knock you out. I'm going to do it easily. I'm going to make it look easy. My dad's talking trash to you. I'm talking trash to you. You can get it. And then your brother can get it at 55. Like, he was talking crazy. And he goes in, he backed it up. And now what I kind of want to open the discussion for is how he's leveraging all the other promotions up against Bellator for this next check. He's like, yo, y'all just gave me $1 million. Like you said, every fight of mine has been in Bellator. I just beat y'all favorite champion. Now what? There's nothing left for me. Y'all got to pay me the bag so I don't go to the UFC. Dana's interested in him. Dana said, we got to have a call with him. We got to have a talk with him. Dana wasn't interested in Pitbull, which I found interesting, but he wasn't interested in Pitbull, but he's interested in AJ McKee. Now, I don't know his contract situation, and we had a brief talk about this. I don't know if you ever think some type of cross promotion between Bellator and One Championship or Bellator PFL, Bellator UFC would ever happen. I don't know if you even think that. I know I personally don't, but how would you feel if, AJ McKee fought Max Holloway or something like that?
I would only support it if AJ McKee made the jump like Michael Chandler did, like several other fighters did from Bellator to the UFC. I wouldn't want to see a cross-promotion type of fight because in the past we have seen it between Pride and the UFC and the lines get blurred. I'm not a big fan of it, although I do think it would be great for the sport. I just think it would cause a lot of issues down the road past that fight. I will say, though, in terms of leverage, smart play by AJ McKee. Here's why. Because it's already known that Bellator pays their fighters handsomely, and the UFC gets backlash for maybe underpaying their fighters in certain cases. If AJ McKee is the champion, and he's saying, Bellator, look, I have all these other promotions that may be looking at me. It's time for you to pay up. He may get more money from Bellator, and he'll stay. And Michael Chandler did the same thing for the past few years, and even on his latest contract, he said that Bellator was actually going to pay him more than what the UFC had offered, but just the bright lights that the UFC, that you would fight under there, it was too much for him to pass up on, so he decided to make the jump. AJ McKee, in this instance, though, I want to see him stay. I want to see him stay at 145 pounds. I know he's a big featherweight, but look, he's got unfinished business there. I don't want to see him jump up to 155 and try to take the belt from Patricio Pitbull right now. I got to see at least one title defense in Bellator at the featherweight weight limit. Mads Burnell, who fought in the co-main, beat Emmanuel Sanchez. Yeah. Sign me up for that. AJ McKee, Mads Burnell. That will be a solid fight. I favor AJ McKee. There are options out there for AJ McKee at 145 in Bellator.
Absolutely. He like you said, he hasn't cleaned the division out yet. I do think him and Burnell will be a great fight, and I think it's the fight to make if they don't give Pitbull a rematch right away. Which, in fairness, if they did, I wouldn't be mad at it. You know, he's earned his stripes. He's earned an immediate rematch, being the double champ. One thing I do find super interesting about the whole cross promotion thing is how the fighters are so aware of what's going on. They're aware that, okay, Bellator, you know, is paying more. They're allowing us to put patches on our shorts and our flags, and we get more sponsorships. But the UFC has the exposure. We can get, you know, our social media followings up a lot higher and stuff like that. So I do like how the fighters are aware of what's going on, and it's not a business where, like, say the NFL, where, you know, Tom Brady just posted on his Instagram, oh, well, how did we, you know, negotiate the cap just dropped 20, and then after the cap dropped, all of a sudden they have a new media deal that they announce. So it's like, and then he called the NFL players ignorant because he's like, you know, 14% increase in revenue in a pandemic year, yet our cap's going down and we're getting paid less and they're making more. So I do like how the fighters are more aware. I do hope that they get some type of union so they can get paid what they actually deserve. But as far as defending the title goes, I would want to see him defend against Mads Burnell. Or honestly, I'm not opposed to him moving up to 55 because when he almost missed weight, he missed it by, I think, 0.2 or 0.3 pounds. He had like an hour or so to cut. And I was a little worried. I'm like, man, like you said, he's a big featherweight. I'm like, man, I really hope he makes weight because, you know, he wouldn't be eligible to win the belt if he didn't. And he came back, he made it, he was fine. But man, like when you have those type of, like, maybe it was a bad weight cut. I don't know. I haven't really heard him speak about it really. But if it was a bad weight cut, maybe his next fight, he may want it to be at 55 just for his health's sake. You know, you don't want to cut that much back to back right away, or if he wants to stay active or not. But if I were him, I would just milk this as long as I could, get all the endorsements I possibly could, and take that $1 million check and run to the UFC.
I'm just a little wary of him going up to 155 because the only fight he would take is against Pitbull. And I said it last week, the optimal weight class for Patricio Pitbull is the lightweight division. For me, I think he's spectacular there. I think he just cuts a little bit too much weight there. And right now, if you're AJ McKee, you're flying high in that division. You're untouched. You're favored to beat everyone else. Pitbull, I think he would still beat him at 155, but I think it would be a far more competitive fight.
Fair. And I do remember you mentioned that 55 was his optimal weight. So maybe AJ knows that. Maybe AJ is, nah, I'm okay. I'll stay at 45.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see what happens. We're gonna wait until he, you know, drops his next move, however he announces that. But as far as guys, let me say something right now. Nader does not even weigh 145 pounds. Don't let him talk.
He walks around what?
Nader's a $110 soaking wet.
I don't know if that's true. I don't, but I just thought it was hilarious that he decided to write that.
Nah, Nader, I'm glad you're tuning in, and I'll agree. You're the best 45er in the world. Just not at fighting, but you are the best 45er in the world. But speaking of the best in the world, let's get back to the UFC. We have this weekend 265, Cyril Gane, Derek Lewis, interim heavyweight title. Go.
You know what, Dorian? You and I are on this show because the upper management at this fine company trust us to give our unadulterated opinion. So I'm going to give it right now. Not only is Cyril Gane going to win this bout, but he is going to prove that Saturday evening is an example of why he's on a path to be the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. You can say I am nuts. You can clip this and call me an imbecile after the fight if he loses. Fine. I am willing to die on this hill. I am willing to go out on such a limb because I have such belief in Ciryl Gane. The reason why, we have not seen an ascent like this since Josh Barnett and Daniel Cormier. And funny enough, those two guys fought in Strikeforce in 2012, and Daniel Cormier actually beat him to win the Grand Prix in Strikeforce. I just think Ciryl Gane, with how, I guess you could say, little of experience he has compared to the rest of the heavyweight pool, he's caught up at this point in time. And I think from a technical standpoint, I don't think Derek Lewis can match him. Yes, Derek Lewis, in my opinion, is the hardest puncher in UFC history. I don't think it's close. If you were tied for the most knockouts in UFC history, that has to count for something. I don't want to hear about Francis Ngannou. And the reason why I bring that up is because if Ciryl Gane is able to get past Derek Lewis, Ciryl Gane has to be looked at as a potential great. He's not there yet, but I think he will be well on his way. He will be champion one day. I'm here to tell you that. Not only interim champion after Saturday night, but look, he's just better than Derek Lewis everywhere. And I've heard people say Ciryl Gane's a better striker. He's more technical, better on the ground, but Derek Lewis is going to knock him out. Okay, great. What if he doesn't? Is Derek Lewis really going to have a performance like he did against Blagoy Ivanov at UFC 244? No. Ciryl Gane is not Blagoy Ivanov. So I honestly think Ciryl Gane is going to cruise to a unanimous decision victory. It's going to be very similar to how it was against Jairzinho Rozenstruik and pretty close to how it was against Alexander Volkov. Some may call it boring, but look, he's going to be technical. I think he's going to find a way to take Lewis down, and he's going to work him out for 5 rounds.
Okay, so let's start with Gane. I want to rebuttal a couple points. You said his experience is caught up to the heavyweights. Now, I'm going to disagree but agree, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Follow me here. He's not as experienced as Derek Lewis. However, I do think the guys he has been in there with has so far pushed his development to where it needs to be to match up with Derek Lewis's experience, if that makes sense.
Bingo.
So, they both fought Volkov. One did a lot better than the other, but they both won. And not for nothing, a very, very quick turnaround. June 26th, Ciryl Gane fought Volkov. So he didn't have much time to, fall out of camp, get out of shape, and then come back in to cut all the weight. So he's going to be good. And I don't think he cuts much, if at all, to make heavyweight because he's not at the 65 weight limit. But moral of the story, he's in shape. He's rolling. The tides look like they're in Gane's favor. Obviously, he's undefeated. The more technical fighter, the better striker, the better clinch fighter, the better Muay Thai, the better ground game, the better grappler. I'm here to tell you, Michael, Derek Lewis is going to knock him out.
You're one of those guys.
I'm one of those guys, yeah. And if y'all peep the TWSN MMA team, we all made predictions and we have it posted. I'll retweet it right now for you guys to see. I am the only one on the team who picked Derek Lewis to win. I want that to be known. I just retweeted it. I want that to be known. I'm the only person on our MMA team to pick Derek Lewis, and I'm going to tell you why. Ciryl Gane is everything that you said he is. He is all of the better technical fighter. One thing he isn't is bulletproof. Derek Lewis has cannons on his hands, both hands. See a tattoo across his chest? Knockout King. That's not there just because he wanted a chest tat. That's there because he has the most knockouts in the UFC. He not only can he catch Gane once or twice and put him down, he can bait Gane in to catch him, which I don't think Gane has been baited in yet, because the reason people are calling him such a boring fighter is because he never takes those risks. He goes in, he boop, 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 and he pops out. He's not there to get countered. He's not there to really, wrestle around, tussle around if he doesn't want to. Everything, all the exchanges happen on Gane's terms. With Derek Lewis, that's okay. And the fact that this is a main event, obviously, and it's a 5-round fight, believe it or not, that favors Derek Lewis. That gives him an additional 10 minutes to land that one punch. And I see your face. I know Gane's cardio is better, obviously. If it goes to the cards, Gane won. Let's just be real. If it goes to the cards, Ciryl Gane's going to win. He's not going to take his O on points. But it gives Derek Lewis that extra 10 minutes to land that one shot he needs. And you see it a lot in MMA. You have the undefeated guy. He's rolling. He looks unbeatable. He loses one time and everything changes. Now, I do think Gane is going to be a future champion. So I don't want to say his career is going to, drop off a hill or a cliff or anything like that. But I do think Derek Lewis shows him that there's levels to this. And I think similarly to what happened with Johnny Walker, Corey Anderson told him, you're undefeated, you're good, but there's levels. Boom. Johnny Walker sleep.
We're not comparing Johnny Walker to Ciryl Gane. Here's why we're not going to do that. Derek Lewis, since he's been in the UFC, has not gone 5 rounds. Ciryl Gane, back-to-back fights, has gone 5 rounds. And Derek Lewis has been on record in interviews saying he doesn't like going the distance because his cardio, he doesn't trust it. So how does the extra 10 minutes favor Derek Lewis?
Because he has 10 extra minutes to land one shot, as opposed to it being a 15-minute fight where now he may have to allow, like when you saw Lewis versus Volkov, literally the entire all 3 rounds was just Volkov picking him apart and then moving away, picking him apart and moving away. Derek Lewis was kind of playing possum, acting like he was hurt, so Volkov would come in for the finish so he can exchange with him, and he wasn't doing it until he did. A minute left, Derek Lewis lands one shot, folds Volkov. Now, obviously, we haven't seen Gane folded, so his chin, I'm not going to call it, suspect, because I haven't seen him get chinned yet. But what I will say, certain guys have certain type of power in their hands. You said it best. You don't want to hear nothing about Francis Ngannou. You know who the knockout king is.
Yeah.
It's not Francis. It's Derek Lewis.
Yep.
That extra 10 minutes, he needs to land one punch. I don't think Derek Lewis is going to sprawl and, spin out and take his back and choke him out. Nothing like that's going to happen. If Derek Lewis doesn't land a punching knockout, he's not going to win. Let's all be real. He knows it just like we know it. And I was listening to their pre-fight interviews. Actually, it's kind of interesting. Gane is a little funny Frenchman. He's a funny guy. He's gotten a little disrespectful, a little trash talk. Apparently, his sparring partners were just told to wing right hands at him. And someone asked him about it, like, hey, is it true that your sparring partners wing right hands at you all training camp? And he goes, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I had them do. But, that's what he does, so I'm prepared for it. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I get you're undefeated. I get you're flying high, but you got to be careful because Derek Lewis isn't somebody to play with.
You can't play around with Derek Lewis. And that's one thing. Although I am complimenting Ciryl Gane to the high heavens, Derek Lewis has the power that no matter where the fight is, you can't overlook him. But look, in February, Ciryl Gane fought someone who's very similar to Derek Lewis, and I think more of a technical striker in Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Look what Jairzinho Rozenstruik did to Alistair Overeem. He was losing to Overeem, and then one punch, boom, it's over. That easily could have been a scenario that Gane found himself in with Rozenstruik, but he didn't. He found a way to stay calm, stay measured, and ride out to a win. I think he's going to win that way. And another thing I want to bring up, everyone is talking about the home field advantage, if you will, or home court advantage, since they're playing at the Toyota or fighting at the Toyota Center. Look, okay, Jamal Charlo is a boxer, a champion, who's also from Houston, Texas. On June 19th, he faced Juan Macias Montiel. He won the fight, but it was a very close fight. He was given all he could handle against Montiel. He got away with one as a Houston born and bred fighter. This time around, though, I don't think Derek Lewis is going to be that fortunate. And the reason why I bring it up is because there's a lot of pressure to fighting in your hometown. Everyone likes to talk about the pressure coming into someone else's hometown. But look, Kell Brook, a former welterweight champion in boxing, defended his title in 2017 against Errol Spence in England. And everyone's like, oh, Errol Spence isn't going to go across the sea to beat him. And guess what? Errol Spence did. Cyril Gane, I think, will do the same thing. Fly across from France or wherever he was after his fight to Houston and win the interim title. There's a lot of pressure to fighting in your hometown. And I don't know if Derek Lewis, and I don't think Derek Lewis will be able to handle that pressure.
And I'm glad you brought that up. You're right. The pressure will be on Derek Lewis to win the fight and get a finish, not just win, because winning isn't good enough. He has to get the finish.
Yep.
But at the same time, Gane's back-to-back 5-round fights that he's been in, point fighting, and I'm not slandering him. I don't think he's a boring fighter at all. I actually like technical fights more than I do the brawls, believe it or not. But he has been in the apex with little to no fans, so he hasn't been booed. If he's standing and he's ducking and he's running from Derek Lewis and he gets booed for 2-3 rounds straight and the ref's looking at him like, hey, okay, now let's get some action. Gane, we don't know the type of pedigree he has when it comes to this level of magnitude. Like this is a UFC title fight he's in. This is only his 9th fight in MMA or 10th fight in MMA. So he may be pressured by the same fans that are pressuring Derek Lewis to do something he normally wouldn't do. And that split second it takes for Derek Lewis to land a left or a right hand is going to be all that Gane had to do, is take that one step forward when he should have taken a step back. If he was in the apex, he would have taken a step back. And not for nothing, Derek Lewis in his backyard doesn't have to do much traveling. Like you said, Gane's coming. I don't think he went back to France after the Volkov fight because they have a quarantine window and he don't want to miss out these 8 weeks or whatever he had. But wherever he's coming from, he hasn't been training in Texas, and that Texas heat a little different. I've seen him on his Instagram in front of Traded Truth murals and stuff like that, and he's playing DJ Screw and stuff like that. So he's getting all of the Texas flavor, and I know a little bit about it. I was in Texas not too long ago, so he's getting a little bit of that Texan flavor in him. Maybe he gets hyped up and he's like, yo, I'm in a title fight finally. This is what I work for, even though I've only been doing MMA 2-3 years. Okay, now boom, let me go get this finish. I'm going to show these Texans that I'm not a boring fighter. And that mental mistake, similar to what Malik thought Masvidal and Usman would be, with Usman standing on his feet and saying, I want the finish. I think this is going to be very, very, very similar if Gane takes the bait of the crowd, because they're going to boo him from the time his music starts. He's going to get booed. When he gets introduced by Bruce Buffer, he's going to get booed. When the bell rings, he's going to get booed. When he grabs Derek Lewis and holds him up against the cage, he's going to get booed. So hopefully his mental is as strong as his physical attributes and he'll get the win. But I think it's hard to pick against a guy who only needs one shot in 25 minutes. If it was a 15-minute fight, I'd pick Gane.
When it comes to fighting in front of a crowd, recently, you're right. Cyril Gane has not fought in front of a crowd. It's been primarily at the Apex because he only fought once in 2020, and it was against Junior Dos Santos at the Apex Center in December. But look, the fight before that was in South Korea in front of a sold-out crowd on the undercard of Frankie Edgar and the Korean Zombie. I know it's not a title fight, but look, he fought Tanner Boser in an arena with fans there. And the expectation was that there will be pressure, and he lived up to it. I'm not comparing apples to apples. I understand he's going into enemy territory, but yeah. I'm just bringing that up because in Busan, South Korea, they are big MMA fans, and they love watching UFC fights. So he knew the pressure was on there. This isn't really new territory to him. I know he's only had 9 fights, but in December 2019, like I just said, he fought at the Sajik Arena in South Korea. I don't think this is as foreign as you are making it out to be.
Fighting in Korea against Tanner Boser on an undercard is nowhere near the same as fighting Derek Lewis in Houston for the main event for the heavyweight title of the world.
But he fought in front of fans, though. That's what I'm saying.
No, yeah, of course. I'm not saying he has he's never been booed before in his life. I'm sure he's been booed before, but as an athlete, you're going to get booed, but it's a different boo. Could you imagine going in could you imagine if Khabib and Conor fought in Ireland? That would have been a whole different type of boo than what Khabib was getting, in MSG or in Vegas or wherever you're at, So yeah, he fought Tanner Boser in Korea, but at the end of the day, he wasn't as known. There weren't any expectations. He didn't have a label as a boring fighter. It's crazy when you're undefeated and other heavyweights are calling you boring fighters. Derek Lewis said he's a boring fighter. Your opponent's calling you boring. Don't let me talk you out of it, Gane. But that type of talk could get in his head, and it could make for him to be like, you know what? I'm tired of being boring. I want to go for the knockout. I want to knock Derek Lewis out in his hometown, and then I want to fight Francis wherever we can. I don't think Francis is going to be open, but if he knocks out Derek Lewis, Francis is next. If he knocks out Francis, they're going to be talking about, is he the greatest heavyweight of all time, like you said, which is just nuts. 9 fights in, but he's showing a lot of potential. I'll give it to him.
Dorian, I could go on and argue about this for hours. I'll just say you'll see Saturday night what Ciryl Gane is capable of. And the reason why I'm kind of stopping short of continuing is because we're going to be talking about it Saturday with a loaded crew here at TWSN. I believe it's 1 p.m. Eastern time. I could be wrong, but our UFC 265 live preview show, we're going to be talking about this fight. So that's why I'm kind of cutting it off now, because I said what I had to say. You know how I feel about Ciryl Gane. You also know how I feel about Derek Lewis. You can't overlook him, but Ciryl Gane's just on another level.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you plugged that. I was going to real quick touch on the Chiesa-Luque fight. Mm-hmm. And that's honestly, I'm looking forward to that more so than I have the main event. But like you said, we'll get into it on Saturday, guys. Make sure you tune in, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. You'll know when we're going live. If it's not 1 p.m. Eastern, I'm pretty sure it usually is.
It should be.
But make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, hit the bell, bing, and then you'll know when we go live. So aside from that, man, is there anything else that the streets need from us this week?
Next week, it won't be as packed of a show just because at least I don't believe there are any UFC fights. I think the UFC has the week off on the 14th, right? I think. Right. And then Correct. The 21st, they come back. So the show might not be as stacked next week, but look, when you and I are on the mic, you can't miss it.
Facts. And not for nothing, Max and Yair is looking to get rebooked. So hopefully next week we'll have some more fights booked, and, maybe Conor will tweet some crazy stuff that we can talk about. But other than that, man, thank you guys for joining us on another edition of Strikes and Submissions, AKA #NoDecisions. We out.
Get up, let me begin. This is TWSN.